There's been lots of skepticism about the NFL's international plans. Ian Wishingrad, the founder and creative director of BigEyedWish, joins us live in New York for more on this. So Ian, this expansion into London and Mexico City, how is that working out so far?
Well, so far so good, and I think akin to Netflix that uses a lot of data to figure out where to go next or what shows to create, the NFL knew there was an appetite and people in those markets were looking for it, so it was very natural to expand there. The appetite is, for example, in China, you could appreciate the economic ramifications and why it would be such a great move to go there, but the actual interest there is very little, and sometimes the NFL is just like a brand, and sometimes those don't translate very well, so you have to find a way to establish yourself or create some kind of desire before you just go to that market.
Now, it's interesting because at a lot of the NFL games that I saw in London, a lot of it was American expats really driving a lot of that. So what are some other possible locations that the NFL might target?
Not knowing the actual data of where there are a lot of expats, I would think that's the lowest hanging fruit, would be to find countries where at least you have an audience of people that are hungry for it. Next, I think you'd have to do some level of proximity or some relationship to a sport that shares some of its qualities. So I think in London, as an example, rugby as a culture is not too dissimilar to American football. But in other countries, whether you have cricket or tennis or golf, or those things have nothing to do with it. So you have to try to figure out where there's already an affinity for it.
So in terms of the potential and interest that you see for American football in China, what are your thoughts?
I see why American football to China is an amazing business move. The NFL is no different than any other business. It's a brand. And as someone said before me, there's a great opportunity to grow economically. There's a ton of people that are potentially interested in it. But I also think we've seen a lot of trouble where American companies or brands don't go well in China. Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg learned Mandarin, and he's been trying to bring that company to China, and that's not been very successful. So I think there's a real effort to figure out if they bring it, will they come? My understanding is there are only maybe 500 million people that are interested, or 50 million people there, which is a really small number compared to the overall population. So it's not something you could just dip your toe into there.
Now, one way that people have been trying to get in is through some of these streaming deals that we've seen with heavyweights like Tencent, Verizon, and Amazon. How might that help broaden the international audience?
I'm going to bring everything back to advertising and branding because that's where I know, but the most important thing when you come into that practice is awareness, literally awareness. We know in America about cricket, but if we don't see it and we're not exposed to it, there's no chance we're going to appreciate it. So if you start piping in the NFL games or American football to China, people actually might find it, watch it, experiment, learn, and appreciate it. That's the first step to having awareness, and then potentially wanting to pull and say, bring something like that here. That's fun.
Now, American football is already the biggest sport in the US. Does it really need an international audience?
Well, absolutely. It's the biggest sport, but it's in decline because there's a lot of science behind what's happening with CTE and concussions. And like any other company, or any other brand, they've gotten so big, there's nowhere left to go. You have to go internationally or find Mars, Venus, some other solutions like that.
Well, that would certainly be very creative. Now, let's also look at some of the issues. We know that the NFL held a forum on women building careers within the league, and its third Women's Summit will be the Friday before the Super Bowl. How can women provide a broader appeal globally and nationwide?
Well, first off, I think the statistics in America show that 50% of NFL viewers are women, but only a third of people employed at the NFL are women. So there's a delta there that needs to be closed. Also, as I'm sure you're aware, that's happening in this country right now, there's the Me Too Time's Up movement, and like the old boys clubs and all the old franchises or establishments are being totally changed and broken down. So I think we're about to see a whole wave of introduction of the new sex in this sport, and that will help expand it because it's not just more population, it's a whole other point of view and a new level of potential appreciation and participation for it.
And as we look at ways to introduce more people to the market, can we expect to see more collaborations, whether through advertising or sponsorship, both of perhaps Chinese companies in the US and US companies in China?
For sure. Sports, as you've seen, is akin to culture. Nike was built off of Michael Jordan as an example. That's when you merge those two together. So I'd see brands want to be part of something that doesn't feel so commercial. It feels like a part of entertainment and pastime. So a lot of collaborations are a great way for both parties to bring up their awareness and to help expand the success of both.
Well, thank you so much for your insights. Ian Wishingrad of BigEyedWish.